The traumatic and continuing effect of the global financial crisis could have a potentially devastating impact on the poorest in the developing world. New estimates suggest that an additional 90 million could be living on less than 90 pence a day by the end of next year. The British government is calling for a new international approach when the G20 group of nations meet in London next month.
The United Kingdom will take into that summit a commitment to ensure that global efforts to address the economic challenges facing the world economy include key support for the poorest countries. Together, we can ensure that this is the first recession in history where we consciously address the needs of the poor. That this perilous moment in modern history might come to be seen by future historians as a crisis when we were not paralysed by our individual fears, but came together to act in our common interest.
As the conference began to consider the impact of financial crisis on global poverty, the British government is reviewing its approach to international development. Douglas Alexander called for the nations in the developed world to increase their annual aid. Britain is set to increase its contribution by 0.7% of GDP by 2013.
That is why we should now establish a new global poverty alert to tell us more quickly and more accurately the needs on the ground in order that we might best direct an effective international response. And as the Prime Minister will set out, we now should establish at the World Bank a new fund to help developing countries provide social protection for the poorest and most vulnerable, not just for this but also for future crises.
The Minister also highlighted the dangers of the financial crisis in putting further in peril those states already suffering conflict. He mentioned a recent visit to Gaza and how the recent conflict had exacerbated the daily problems faced by its inhabitants. Looking back almost a decade, he invoked the targets set out at the start of the millennium.
Alongside these conflicts are the fragile states that are home to 1 billion people. States that are either incapable or unwilling to provide their citizens with safe shelter, the rule of law, or the most basic requirements of life. The world will not succeed in meeting the Millennium Development Goals unless we can tackle the poverty that exists in these countries. So the Department for International Development has increased the proportion of our assistance consciously to fragile states from 1/4 of our bilateral programme to 40% of it today. And we will go further until 60% of our bilateral work will, by 2011, be in fragile states.
Africa has been hard hit by the financial crisis, and the damage to national economies could be long-lasting. A leading African banker wants the continent's problems to be high on the G20 agenda.
That we can get Africa's voice and concerns on the table. And one of those concerns is that international commitments which have been made are now more valid than ever, and that they are adhered to. And these are commitments made by Africans, but also by the international community. And second, that this crisis has thrown up new challenges which were not there at the time of Gleneagles, which we must address.
Included in the British proposal for a concerted approach to global poverty is reform of 3 international organisations. Ensuring the European Union delivers more and better aid, the United Nations should adopt stronger leadership, especially on women's rights, and the World Bank should improve its accountability towards its customers in the developing world.